Take a ride on the Gravitron at your local amusement park, however, and notice how the faster it spins, the more you are pushed away from the center of spin, not towards it. Even if the centripetal, inward pulling force, of gravity did exist, which it does not, the centrifugal, outward pushing force, of the ball Earth's supposed 19 mile per second spin would also exist and have to be overcome, yet neither of these opposing forces have ever been shown to have any existence outside the imaginations of heliocentric scientists. Astronomers claim to have measured all the planets' distances, shapes, orbits, weights, relative positions, and times of revolution, all based on the law of gravitation, and without gravity, their entire cosmology folds under its own weight. Without gravity, people cannot stand upside down on a ball Earth. Without gravity, the Earth and planets cannot be revolving around the Sun. Without Newtonian gravitation, Einsteinian relativity, Copernican heliocentricity, and the entire Big Bang Ball Earth mythos cannot exist and falls to pieces. Gravity, both metaphorically and quite literally, just does not hold any water, not as a sound theory of cosmology, and not as a law supposedly responsible for holding in the world's oceans. Light things rise up, heavy things fall down. Simply a natural property of weight and density. That is very different from gravity. Gravity is a hypothetical magnetic-like force possessed by large masses, which Isaac Newton needed to help explain the heliocentric theory of the universe.
Gravity sucks, gravity pulls, gravity don't follow rules on the spinning ball. It makes us stick. Gravity is magic. It's magic. It's magic.
Now, even if gravity did exist, why would it cause both planets to orbit the Sun and people to stick to the Earth? Gravity should either cause people to float in suspended circular orbits around the Earth, or it should cause the Earth to be pulled and crashed into the Sun. What sort of magic is gravity that it can glue people's feet to the ball Earth?
Gravity sucks, gravity pulls, gravity don't follow rules on the spinning ball. It makes us stick. Gravity is magic.
Gravitation is only a subterfuge employed by Newton in his attempt to prove that the Earth revolves around the Sun. And the quicker it is relegated to the tomb of all the Capulets, the better will it be for all classes of society.
Gravity sucks, gravity pulls, gravity don't follow rules on the spinning ball. It makes us stick. Gravity, it's a con trick. It's magic. It's magic. It's magic. It's magic.
There is a popular myth taught to school children, which most adults today still believe, that people in history have traveled in perfectly straight lines eastwards or westwards, and eventually arrived back at their starting point. It is heralded as proof of the globe Earth, and claimed that hundreds of adventurers since Magellan have completed such successful circumnavigations, but the truth is that no one in history has ever set off traveling in a perfectly straight line and returned back at their starting point. All successful circumnavigations in history, whether by sea or air, have instead followed the same pattern, which is sailing or flying the most convenient route from port to port, stopping for supplies and refueling until a complete circle has been made. Not a single sailor or aviator in history has or could travel only in the same one perfectly straight direction and magically arrive back where they began. This ridiculous lie becomes obvious when critically examined, but when taught to young children, successfully bends and warps their minds into accepting globe indoctrination. Unlike the cardinal directions on a compass rose, north, south, east, and west on Earth are not simply straight lines separated by 90 degrees. North, rather than being an upward shooting arrow, is actually a point, a center point, the center point of the entire Earth, known as the geographic North Pole, situated directly below Polaris, the North Pole star, the only motionless star in the heavens, which marks the exact northern center point of the sky. South, rather than being a downward shooting arrow, is actually every line tangent to the northern center point, or in other words, every straight line extending outwards from the North Pole heads due south. East and west, rather than being right and left facing arrows, are actually clockwise and counterclockwise circles around the pole. The sun, moon, and stars all rise in the east and set in the west, making perfect circles over and around us every day. As you can observe, they travel in a circular westward path over and around the Earth, and do not all travel in a straight leftward direction as suggested by a compass rose. Likewise, navigators since ancient times have used Polaris to guide their ships, knowing that Polaris was the heavenly North Pole. South was traveling keeping your back to Polaris. East meant traveling keeping your left shoulder 90 degrees to the pole star, and west meant traveling keeping your right shoulder 90 degrees to the pole star. All circumnavigations in history have been eastwards or westwards, and never northwards or southwards, because the latter is geographically impossible. Likewise, southern hemisphere flights from Australia to South America, or New Zealand to South Africa, for example, never fly the shortest, most direct route on a globe, which would be southwards over Antarctica. It is claimed this is because such flights would allegedly be too cold for any airplanes to handle. But the reality is the routes are geographically impossible because Antarctica is not a tiny ice continent confined to the underside of a spherical spinning ball Earth. Antarctica is actually the outer southern perimeter of our level motionless plain Earth and surrounds the other 6 continents. How far southwards Antarctica actually extends and how it terminates or what exists beyond it are all unknown to and kept from the general public, however, and as a result, no completely accurate, fully functioning flat Earth map exists or could exist without the people being first allowed full, independent exploration of the Arctic, Antarctic, and everywhere else. There are, however, several maps which work as good visual aids for approximating the geography of our flat stationary Earth. The Gleason's 1892 New Standard Map of the World and Hammond's 1945 Air Age Map of the World are 2 such maps. These so-called azimuthal equidistant maps are used in practical navigation and can be found in the logos of the United Nations, World Health Organization, International Maritime Organization, and International Civil Aviation Organization. They purport these to be simply 2-dimensional representations of a spherical Earth with the North Pole at the center point, and claim these maps were made by flattening the globe. But just the opposite is true, and the globe, specifically the so-called continent of Antarctica, was made by spherizing our flat Earth and bundling the expansive outer perimeter into a cramped, oddly shaped ice continent under the ball, kept off limits by treaty from the general public. In the flat Earth model, the sun and moon spotlights are perpetually hovering over and parallel to the surface of the Earth. From our vantage point, due to the law of perspective, the day and night luminaries appear to rise up the eastern horizon, curve peaking high overhead, and then sink below the western horizon. They do not escape to the underside of the flat Earth, as one might imagine, but rather rotate concentric clockwise circles around the circumference from tropic to tropic. The appearance of rising, peaking, and setting is due to the common law of perspective, where tall objects appear high overhead when nearby, but at a distance gradually lower towards the vanishing point. Samuel Rowbotham said, "Although the sun is at all times above and parallel to the Earth's surface, he appears to ascend the firmament from morning until noon, and to descend and sink below the horizon at evening. This arises from a simple and everywhere visible law of perspective. A flock of birds, when passing over a flat or marshy country, always appears to descend as it recedes, and if the flock is extensive, the first bird appears lower or nearer to the horizon than the last. The farthest light in a row of lamps appears the lowest, although each one has the same altitude. Bearing these phenomena in mind, it will easily be seen how the sun, although always parallel to the surface of the Earth, must appear to ascend when approaching and descend after leaving the meridian or noonday position. What can be more common than the observation that, standing at one end of a long row of lamp-posts, those nearest to us seem to be the highest, and those farthest away the lowest, whilst, as we move along towards the opposite end of the series, those which we approach seem to get higher, and those we are leaving behind appear to gradually become lower. It is an ordinary effect of perspective for an object to appear lower and lower as the observer goes farther and farther away from it. Let anyone try the experiment of looking at a lighthouse, church spire, monument, gas lamp, or other elevated object from a distance of only a few yards, and notice the angle at which it is observed. On going farther away, the angle under which it is seen will diminish, and the object will appear lower and lower as the distance of the observer increases, until, at a certain point, the line of sight to the object and the apparently uprising surface of the Earth upon or over which it stands will converge to the angle which constitutes the vanishing point or the horizon, beyond which it will be invisible. Heliocentrist would have you believe the very opposite of what every human who has ever walked the Earth has seen with their own eyes. It is obvious to any child and sovereign-minded adult that the sun, moon, stars, and planets, every light in the sky above, revolves around the motionless earth beneath our feet. It is also plain to see that the sun and moon are both approximately the same size and situated relatively close to Earth, not 400 times divergent and millions upon millions of miles away.